My name is Jessie Turner, and I'm the director of the International Alliance to Combat Ocean Acidification. Great to see some new friends on the line today and some old friends with us. And I'm really happy to share the next hour and a half, maybe a little bit less. We'll see how much wanted to give enough time to kind of get through presentations and have some meaningful discussion. But really thrilled to have you here for what is our fourth ever communications webinar through the OA Alliance. Just as a little background for folks that might not be familiar, we were launched in 2016 as a way to bring more governments into thinking about the issue of ocean acidification, both as a climate change issue, but also as something that governments and communities and industry and business can be doing something about proactively. And we've really been focused on the policy side, I think, as many of you know, really focused on the technical kind of science side and making sure that science is fit for purpose. And I think along the way, sometimes we forget the value of communications. And it's really great to be here with this team today because I think you'll see the growth in our thinking around communications of this topic, certainly over the last 10 years. Our very first communications webinar, I believe, was in 2018, where we were just sharing examples of acidification comms from different partners, NGOs like NRDC. We had the Alaska Ocean Acidification Network join us, Plymouth Marine Lab in the UK, the Suquamish tribal government in the United States, and even the New Zealand Learning Center of Marine Sciences. And they all shared the way that they communicate acidification to their different user groups. In 2020, we had our second communications webinar where we were able to be a little bit more creative. We had partners join us from doing ocean acidification poetry. And so we were able to share a poem around ocean acidification written by our colleague Sam Jones. And that was really thrilling and an exciting way that we expanded a little bit of the way we were telling this story around acidification. And then in 2023, we were able to level up and give our own sort of take on the way we think about acidification communications through the Alliance. And there we had our comms director, Juliana Correales, kind of bring her expertise, bring her framing to this topic. And that was a great conversation that we were able to have around situating acidification in the context of climate change. So today, I think we're taking it a little bit further. It's a fun way to see it advance and recognizing that for many years we engage partners around talking about acidification. What is it? What is it caused by? Why should we care? What can we do about it? And this conversation, I think, is evolving that a little bit to thinking about the landscape of communicating climate change and acidification in a rapidly changing media environment. And I'm really thrilled to be turning it over to, I guess, our keynote speaker, keynote presenter, Laura Sakorun, who's the managing director at Meridian Consulting, to give us a little bit of this give us a little bit of background from her perspective of how she thinks acidification has been or could be better covered in the press, some of the challenges that we need to be overcoming as an acidification community to inspire more action against climate change and ocean change, and some of the recommendations that she might have for us. So Laura, really over to you, and thrilled to jump in today. I'll see if you can share your screen and we'll take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much. I will set a little timer to make sure that I'm not going over. I am so thrilled to be here today because we have, had the opportunity to be working with the OE Alliance for almost a couple of years now. And I think I have learned a lot about ocean acidification that actually applies to my field of media. So I would love to share with you this presentation on, let me see if I could bring it full screen. There you go. On basically the changing waters that we're navigating media-wise and how to successfully communicate about ocean acidification in a media world, the digital world, that is, as we can all feel day to day, changing very quickly. So the metaphor that I'll be using for this presentation today is actually that the same way that ocean acidification is reshaping marine ecosystems, there are new forces that are reshaping our media environment. I consider myself a media ecologist, and I think it's a very useful way to think about the context of how we are, in which we are communicating, and understand that if we do not diagnose these changes that are happening to the media environment, we will not be able to communicate effectively, but definitely not efficiently because we may waste a lot of resource that obviously a lot of us do not have to begin with. And so the point of his presentation is just to walk you through some of these themes of how the media landscape is changing so that we don't find ourselves basically like, like people trying to farm oysters in the middle of an ocean acidification event, that we don't try to put out messages in ways that do not understand kind of like the whole picture of how communications is working nowadays, which is very different than even a year ago. So without further ado, I'll walk you through the three main challenges, so the three main unseen forces that are changing the chemistry of our media, and then we'll discuss ways in which that applies to ocean acidification and solutions. So we'll end up on a positive note, I promise. The first thing that you may have noticed already, if you are a consumer of news, is the decrease in trust in our media environment. There's a lot of social research behind this, so it's not just me saying it. People are self describing as less trusting, and we see less trust in most institutions, but specifically media institutions. The reasons, the causes behind this, because I know it's a sophisticated audience, so I think you're probably wondering, yeah, but why? There are many, but the main ones is just the accelerated complexity of our world and our social systems. Things are changing so fast, and there's so much entropy that it is really hard to hold people accountable, basically, and that creates a feeling of accountability sinks or spaces where people are not being held to account, and that increases the feeling of mistrust in general. It also has to do with obviously the current poly crisis and post COVID, and the fact that the world seems increasingly complex to people. And it also has to do a lot with AI and misinformation, and the fact that even our belief in the more serious part of media, something like a video, has been eroded to a point where we cannot trust that to be true. And there's like a lack of media literacy that is making all of that worse. So that's why people trust the media less. It's harder to keep track of everything, but also there is just more misinformation in the water than there's ever been. And it shows. The second big change that we are seeing is increased fragmentation. So we probably all grew up in a world where like a few media channels and a few newspapers or magazines could set the media agenda, and that's no longer the case in any way, shape, or form. It's been because of the erosion of mainstream media financially, the cartelization of some of these big media empires that have created a sense of like activation at the edges, the people wanting to kind of take down conventional mainstream media, and a loss of mainstream culture in general. That's why we don't have a song of the summer anymore, because like nobody can agree on what one big kind of media moment is. But it also has to do with social isolation. So increased isolation is been shown to lead to further like online bubbles, and those online bubbles tend to lead to more social isolation. But basically the result is we are all in echo chambers, and we are finding it harder to kind of connect across those smokes and mirrors, basically. And the last one is attentional collapse, which is probably what you're feeling, which is just tired and it's hard to concentrate. This is because of digital overload, is what the anthropologists are calling it, but it's basically content saturation. And it has to do about how cheap content is to produce, the fact that we have an attention economy that runs on attention for advertisement. And so that's what fuels media. Therefore, that's what's being extracted of us as a resource. And it also has to do with the growth of AI, which is making a lot of those worse. So about 50% of content online is already AI generated. So you can imagine how it's going to get very soon, and bots too. So about 50% also of global traffic is actually not humans, but bots. And so that makes it so these environments are very densely populated, in ways that put us off, and that make it really hard for people to stay long enough with one particular piece of media, and kind of forces cognitive multitasking. So in summary, these are kind of like the three main issues that are causing the equivalent of ocean acidification media-wise. The decrease in trust, the public really is struggling to believe what they see, the increased fragmentation, We are more isolated and speaking in parallel to each other than we've ever been. And the attentional collapse, we genuinely have less ability to grapple with complex issues, which of course we know ocean acidification is. So how does this affect us as OA and just like generally climate and ocean communicators? The first one is that we are facing increased denialism and misinformation, and you may have come across whether you're working in science or policy. It's very common. It's harder for us to fight those narratives because talking about them often amplifies them. We are also in a very fragmented ecosystem, which means that issues like ocean and climate are becoming niche. That means the algorithm is likely to push us to people that already know and care about those subjects, but it's harder to reach people who are adjacent, let alone very far away from those subjects. So we are algorithmically likely to find our tribe faster, but it's going to be much harder to reach what it would be like, mainstream awareness about any of these issues, especially when other things in the news like security issues are now like, top of the agenda. Short form content obviously also makes it hard for us to tell complex, slow moving science stories. And yet that is most of the content nowadays. So we have this trade-off between relevancy and, impact. And last but not least, obviously the algorithms do reward conflict and novelty, and a lot of what we're discussing is neither or provides few opportunities to be viewed that way. And so kind of we are at the disadvantage kind of from the get-go. However, the good news is that if we understand that and if we're really aware of the context in which the waters we're swimming in, there's much we can do to fight these currents. So the four main things that we can do, and that I know for a fact the Ocean Acidification Alliance has been integrating into their common strategy, these are kind of like antidotes to each one of these particular challenges. And in yellow, I've just added like a few examples of what Ocean Acidification Alliance has done, but I know that the rest of the team and the rest of the speakers are going to go much more in detail about specific examples of their work. So I'm just going to focus on the theoretical, logic behind why these choices are um, um, antidotes to these challenges, and also from a tactical perspective, the things that I would, if you are going to post tomorrow, or if you're going to do a webinar tomorrow, the things that I would love you to keep in mind. So the first one is thinking local first. We have a crisis of trust, which means that we need to go where trust is more easily found. We need to be, leveraging whatever little trust we have on the environment and nurturing the places where trust grows fastest. Trust grows fastest locally and in specifics. It grows the slowest, as we know, in global generalizations. And so from local media to local voices, people tend to trust local government more than they do, even regional or national government. And so we can leverage that and let the community speak for itself and create campaigns of coordination across local networks, tell stories that are locally relevant, and tell stories that are vertically integrated. So this is something that we can learn from successful campaigns in things like anti-tobacco or even like the anti-plastics campaign, because the tobacco and the plastics industry originally did it themselves. And then we started copying their playbook, which is, can we tell stories from a local perspective onto a global perspective? And can we connect those actors to build a sense of narrative momentum between them? It also works very well for the media because the media always needs practical examples. Journalists have an aversion to telling stories without quotes, without examples. And the issue with ocean acidification is that it's very hard to point at something and say, this is specifically ocean acidification. But it's much easier to do it through local examples. And so this local first approach is more important than ever. And ironically, it's the best way for us to get like scalable, global impact. The second one is the cultural tie-in. So this also has to do with trust. is this idea that like in order for us to stop being perceived as a niche issue or what a lot of people think of, which is like a nice to have issue. Like, oh, I would care about this, but I care about jobs. Or like, I would care about this, but I care about human health or whatever most people's priorities are. Ocean acidification appears as a kind of like an at best adjacent, but probably very remote kind of issue. The solution to that is to tie it in culturally. So what we want to do is to present this subject as connected to subjects that people we already care about. And if we're working with local people, that's great because we already have insight about what may be locally relevant for a particular government, for example. Um, Ideally, we would also be doing these with things that are already tied to the news cycle because of this short attention span. Let's say an example would be we're talking about energy prices and that or like fertilizer and this is affecting food and because we're talking about food security now it's a great time to talk about how ocean acidification is affecting aquaculture too. Like can we find those frames that make things feel relevant and give us a stronger chance to break through people's awareness. And that means proactively, yeah, reaching out to influential voices in those spaces and framing things in their terms. So that those spaces could be food or like shipping, decarbonization, coastal resilience. Can we speak in their own language? And that's what's going to make the biggest difference. And that's what's going to also help us break off those like little echo chambers of digital, the digital bubbles that we are inevitably going to find ourselves in. And that doing that at scale, obviously, it's really hard because it's a lot of effort to be thinking locally and also making sure that we are tying things culturally. And that's why narrative coalitions really matter. On one hand, because of saturation, it takes much longer for a message to stick. So even in conventional marketing, we used to say that you need to repeat something like 6 times before somebody acts on it. Now we are in the 20 times. Like now, even brands who are actually just trying to sell things to people are finding that it takes much longer for any message to permeate, which means we need to tell it more often. And it's really hard to do that individually. But it's not for a coalition. If we all, do it 3 times, then obviously that can add up to hundreds and hundreds of different messages if we do it in coordination. And that's why coalitions matter now more than ever, because message discipline really matters. We can't be switching the message often because the attention span's not there to handle it. But also coordinating across regions also allows us to have a general, big message, but make sure that the message is slightly dynamic so that somebody in a region may know when, the best time to share it is or who's the best media, but also that it's locally relevant. So we can all be kind of rowing in the same direction. And it allows for the return on investment of everybody to be higher. Like if we all just agree on which months, weeks, or themes we are focusing on, everybody benefits at no extra cost, besides, maybe like a WhatsApp group or a coordination call on Zoom. So narrative coalitions matter more than ever. And again, people who are lobbying for things like fossil fuels and know it and do so very often. And last but not least, human-centric novel storytelling. So on one hand, because the media competition is getting so intense and because the content is getting so unified because of AI is a generalist machine. So it creates content that is very, very similar. Everything is starting to sound the same and everything is starting to sound like too much. And so novel storytelling, things that are visually striking, different, original, that have any sort of creative advantage really matter. You can see even conventional brands are going that way. And 360 activations, which is the lingo for basically making sure the message is everywhere at once, also really matters. So we can no longer afford to say, we'll do this in the newsletter and then we'll do an event a month later. We need to be doing the newsletter, the event, the campaign, the stickers, everything at the same time, and then it kind of multiplies the effect of every one of those activations. And that's also been shown. There's like plenty of marketing research that shows that the more you do together, the better every single individual activation works. And that includes events in person, because again, it ties back to the building trust. People build trust much faster in person than they do online. So if you get to combine novel, beautiful, human-led stories with some sort of in-person activation, like I know, we did at UNOC, for example, it that really matters. And last but not least, again, human stories matter because that's who we care about. We're social creatures, but also because they help us hold on to the emotional resonance of the issue and make it specific, make it concrete in a way that, yeah, just no amount of data or fact sheets can ever reach. And I know that's something that everybody else on this call knows a lot about. So we'll let them discuss further about the importance of that emotional engagement. But again, it matters more than ever. The good news, just because I don't want to leave you feeling like we are in any way, shape, or form behind, is that we are breaking through. Ocean acidification is breaking through. This is a good moment. This is precisely the time to push. What you are seeing here is the Google search trends for the theme of ocean acidification in the last like decade or so. And sorry, like decade is 20 years. In the last 20 years, you can see we've basically like tripled on average the amount of interest in the subject. And we have also just in the last year gotten a lot of really important coverage from mainstream media that then has trickled down in a lot of local media, from a huge breakout series in The Guardian, when ocean acidification broke the planetary boundary, to an increasing amount of stories on the New York Times. This is working. This is breaking through the mainstream. We just now need to make sure that we are telling those local stories in a coordinated way, in formats that are original and ideally multimedia, to have the best chance that we can to continue taking momentum. But I think we are at a very good point. We just need to make sure that we understand what we're kind of like the headwinds that we are up against, so that we can adjust ourselves accordingly. But I hope you found this useful and look forward to like, yeah, chatting with the rest of the panelists later.
Oh, thank you so much, Laura. That was a great presentation, and we're really grateful for Meridian's support and partnership with the OA Alliance over the last year or so, seeing lots of applause and reactions, and I'm sure we'll have great questions for you. And I hope it's really evident in my short little presentation here how much we've been taking your recommendations and sort of taking this larger thinking about OA comms to heart. So I'll go ahead and share back my screen. And I should have given you your introduction slide, Laura. That was my apologies there. Great. So for the next maybe 5 minutes, I'll just go ahead and put a little time so I catch myself. I just wanted to reflect a little bit on the lessons that Laura just shared and give everybody here a tiny little tour of some of the resources, some of the products, some of the practices that the OA Alliance has been putting out over the last probably year and a half, and really make sure that these are resources that you all see as available to you. We want you to utilize them. We want you to take advantage of them. And we would love your feedback on additional things that you'd like to see in the world that the Alliance can support. So this is a little bit of just my whistle-stop tour of how the Alliance has evolved our communications working and making sure that you will all receive links to these resources in the maybe a little bit in the chat, but also certainly as a follow-up email to this webinar. So just maybe going back to the four things that Laura mentioned. One of the first ones that I want to pick up on is strong cultural tie-ins, or even strong tying and contextualizing OA to mainstream issues that people care about and are much more conversant in thinking about. I think we often think through the Alliance that we have to have something very specific messaging to ocean acidification, but we're forgetting that acidification work and science is part of a pretty broad set of activities that most partners that we're working with on the climate side, on the conservation side, are pretty much already engaged in. And so oftentimes we hear that acidification isn't relevant to the thing I work on, although I am sympathetic to your cause. And we're really trying to make sure that people understand no, acidification science and messaging can really help you do the thing that you want to do better. So here's a quick little chart that we created through our US working group last year. And I'm not going to read it exhaustively. We will make sure that it's spruced up and everyone receives a copy. But basically, trying to say that acidification can support some pretty key message categories or some pretty key outcomes, and trying to help everybody with some phrases and the ways that acidification messaging can work for you in these different categories. And they are as follows. Obviously, the first and foremost, relaying urgency for climate action and reducing carbon emissions, making sure that we're utilizing acidification, even just in narrative form or contextual form, to be supporting policies that reduce CO2 emissions, and cap and trade programs, renewable energy portfolios, low carbon fuel standard. You often don't see acidification linked to those things. And that's an easy way to make sure that we're utilizing the issue of acidification for that type of outcome. The second one being safeguarding seafood sectors, economies, coastal livelihoods. Laura spoke about this a little bit. I think it's one that we often think of, but making sure that we're talking about how acidification information can support those types of outcomes. Thirdly, protecting and restoring biodiversity and marine habitats. We've got lots of people that are working on sustainable ocean or coastal planning, marine protected areas, marine spatial planning, and they often don't think that acidification measurement is relevant to their work. And so how do we make sure that we can message why that is an important link? Similarly to blue carbon, sequestration and ecosystem resilience with coastal habitats. And then moving into things like reducing coastal pressures and land-based pollution. There's ways we talk about ocean acidification science being really relevant to how governments or communities are thinking about reducing coastal pollution. And then finally, and certainly emerging in the field more, is the ongoing conversations around the role of marine carbon dioxide removal strategies and research, and making sure that acidification science is really messaged as a key part of helping parties think through those types of strategies and that type of research. So again, this is a little bit of a cheat sheet. I'm not going to go into it too much. We go into each of those messaging categories and have some examples of a phrase or a comms little nugget that you might use on acidification to plug it into that type of category. And we'll make sure that you receive that so you can kind of thumb through it and think about in your own context where some of that messaging would be useful. The second point, or one of the points that Laura mentioned, again, is thinking local first. And obviously, that's been a really big shift, I think, even in the Alliance, the way we think about our policy work and even increasingly our comms work. Over the last 2 years, we have gone from just sort of saying every government should have an OA action plan and every government should care about acidification. Here's your toolkit. Good luck. And we've really moved the needle now and starting to have regional hubs. So we have active regional hubs now, in this case, the Western Indian Ocean, where we are actually starting to both contextualize this issue as relevant to coastal priorities or to regional priorities and even regional policy landscapes. And so this is just a quick example of saying, some examples in Seychelles and Kenya and the Western Indian Ocean, where ocean acidification science projects, we are highlighting them, and then we're talking about their relevance for implementing policy domestically or regionally. And so this is a way that we're connecting our policy work and our comms work to make it so much more fit for purpose and place-based. Here's another example in Tanzania, where an acidification monitoring project, we are suggesting its relevance for larger domestic policy. Here's another example in Latin America. Very happy to say it is also finally now in Spanish. So thank you to the colleagues that helped us do that. But again, here we are showing in different numbers around regionally the map of talking about the relevance of seafood economies that are under threat from acidification to these different regional areas. This is a 22-page document. We'll definitely share it with you. And again, we have these examples of very specific, seem like standalone OA science projects, but making sure we're talking about their relevance to regional or national policy when it comes to fisheries management, when it comes to climate adaptation, resilience, blue economies. Those are the things we want people to see this work as relevant to. And then here's a great example in Europe. We've got a really strong program. I see Inken on the line with us, who leads our ocean acidification regional hub focused on European member states and the Commission. And here we again are talking about the regional science that is occurring through regional seas conventions in Europe, and then contextualizing that into these different directives that are common across EU member states. So those are just examples, again, of thinking local first, and it's something we've really tried hard to do a bit more of. And then I will go into again kind of that posters and infographics that we've also developed for different types of users, whether it is our new ocean and coastal acidification infographic, helping people think about the difference between ocean and coastal acidification, bringing a little bit localized focus on coastal acidification. How do you even think about monitoring ocean acidification? We've got that broken down for people to look at, and even how OA fits into these international frameworks. So those are all available as posters and infographics, among many others that we have. What I want to, sorry, who I'm realizing this. The other thing that I want to talk a little bit about, pulling on Laura's presentation, is narrative coalitions. So having a shared language. This is something that we've been working on a lot through something called a communications pack that you can find easily on our website. And I won't go into all the details because I know I'm running a bit over, but here we have things like communications best practices cheat sheet, a glossary of key terms and how we talk about acidification in different elements around the topic. Media FAQs. These are things where we are trying really to help our community of practice, which include all of you, build a shared language and how we talk about this issue, have that consistency as Laura was talking about, and make sure that it's available to all of you. So definitely encourage you to check it out. And then going a little bit backwards, how we're then promoting this work, of course, on social media. Laura mentioned, again, that consistent promotion. We're getting better at making, kind of our new announcements and our social media and our newsletters sort of all flow together. And so that's been a great change that we've been trying to be a bit more timely in our social media and some beautiful comms products that are coming out thanks to Hula and Mariama also on the line with us. And then last but not least, the human-centric storytelling. We have really been working hard at the Alliance to do some more creative communications projects. That is very much led by Juliana Correales, who's with us on the line, our creative comms director here at the Alliance. And I won't go into all these projects. We are going to hear from the director of our short film, Changing Waters, Monica, in just a moment, so she can tell you a little bit more maybe about her journey and certainly in our Q&A, but drawing your attention to things like short films that are telling human stories, things like poetry campaigns. We'll hear from Emily Knight talking about her experience working on ocean conservation and poetry. 3D artistic animations that we've been working with partners like Pangea Seed, who we'll hear from. These are all great resources that we want you to see, use, feel inspired by, and ways that we're trying to dip our toes a little bit more into creative storytelling. So, with that, no, I've done it all wrong. I'm so sorry. I'm very pleased to now introduce a series of three kind of short presentations, and we'll go into some Q&A. And up first, I'm thrilled to turn it over to Monica Naranjo-Shepard, who is director at Luma Storytelling, and also the creator of Changing Waters, our first ever short film through the Alliance. So, Monica, I'll stop sharing and turn it over to you.
Thank you. Let me see how this goes. I'm going to start my presentation and hopefully you can see. Okay. Please let me know if you can see oh, okay, what's happening? I have to tell it. Okay, yeah, please let me know if you can see it.
Looks good to me. I can see a little bit of your
Okay.
search toolbar, and as long as you're comfortable,
Yeah,
we are too.
yeah, I don't know why that is. So yeah, let's leave it there. Okay, well, thank you. I am really happy to be here, and it's not, your normal, not just your normal way of opening a presentation by thanking the invitation. I mean it truly because I've been working in the science storytelling space for decades, and I am genuinely excited at how I feel that the space is changing nowadays. The amount of awareness from scientists, from policymakers, from just everybody that is trying to push uh, awareness in society about these issues. Now I cannot even begin to tell you how it has changed the level of awareness that they have towards the value of communications. So when anything like this happens, I am honored to be sitting here and I am thrilled to be invited because it is telling me that we truly are beginning to understand that really we can we can't pretend to create the change that we want to create in the world if we don't bring communications in from the get-go. So, right. So I was invited to just give a short talk on how we can make science more engaging through storytelling. That is always an extremely intimidating proposition because communication being and storytelling being something that is so human, so natural to all of us, it's extremely difficult to decode and to recode in the form of a story. And so in 15 minutes, there's no way to give a master class on storytelling. And as I will say further along in my presentation, it's not even a recipe that we have. Like I sit in front of you as an expert in storytelling, and all I can tell you is that we don't know what we're doing. We're just doing educated guesses as we go along. Add to that the extremely inspiring yet terrifying presentation that Laura just gave. And I felt that she was speaking directly to my heart because I am here as a dinosaur coming to talk to you about the charming little tools that we have for cinematography and filmmaking. And honestly, I've been for many years now wondering what the true role of what I do and people like me, what we do in this new landscape that we find ourselves. I have dedicated my life to long formats like medium length and feature length films. And I mean, how many times have you gone to the cinema to watch a documentary? Like the way we are now communicating is through social media, through very short formats that are ever changing. So anyway, just to say, I, in any case, have always acknowledged that storytelling, when it comes to cinema or filmmaking, is a tool for others to advance their own agendas. And in my case, the agendas that I want to help advance are the ones that I consider will leave a better planet after we go. But this is to say, I don't pretend that what I do is the end product. I can only embrace storytelling for cinema as a tool for people that know more than me on what doors to knock on, what audiences to reach, what those audiences like. But it is truly a humbling moment as a filmmaker, the environment that we find ourselves in. Okay, so to begin with, I think that what we are all trying to avoid by all means is the proverbial death by PowerPoint. Because, and I think that this is a fear that we can relate to, especially here, because when we think about science, when you think about the ocean, when you think about abstract concepts like ocean acidification, this death by PowerPoint, because of all the information that we want to convey, is so easy to fall into, right? And so we are trying to ask ourselves, how can we ignite our audience's curiosity? How can we retain that curiosity? And finally, how could we aspire to get them in action after we have sparked something in them? And this is a true challenge of the nuance of science, because we were boring, we were not boring, we were lazy to begin with as humans, and social media has done us no favors. So now we're really swimming against the current, no pun intended, to try to get messages that require patience, that require nuance, that require contesting our own biases, things that we already didn't like, and again, that social media has only exacerbated. So anyway, at the end of the day, what we our baseline is how do we get to not bore people to tears when we are telling them our story? In order to try to avoid that, storytelling is the antidote. And because our audiences are constantly looking for reasons to care about what we are telling them until they get bored of giving us opportunities to give them a reason to care, right? So as soon as we start watching a movie or scrolling, doom scrolling, or whatever it is that we're doing, engaging with content, our brain is constantly scanning, scanning, scanning until it finds a reason to care. That reason is normally going to have to do with either a bias that they like to have confirmed or a feeling that they like to feel, sometimes feelings they don't like to feel, but that's a bit more complicated. But the point is they are giving us constant opportunities to care, and then at some point they are just going to lose interest, and again that span of time is getting shorter and shorter. So one first key is to think of story as real life, and then but taking all the boring parts out and just leaving the good stuff in. So what is storytelling, and why do we keep talking about storytelling? It is very, very different from simply talking. It is thinking about a message and then stripping it from the naturalness of it, of how you would just enter a room and begin, the word escapes me. Well, basically just searching for the words as they come to you, right? To express your message. Storytelling is not a natural exercise in that sense. You take a step back and you begin looking at the information that you're going to convey as building blocks. And you play around with, maybe if I start with this, it will create some interest, and then I'll make them laugh with this other thing, but then I'm gonna make them cry with this other thing. And so all of the sudden you become like a magician or something with bits of information, but it is an extremely deliberate exercise. It's no longer your natural way of communicating. It's something much more deliberate and unnatural. And then you have to try to convey it in a natural way. But the exercise behind it is forcing us as humans to look at messaging in a way that is very surgical, and we are not used to looking at communication that way. What is why would we do that? Because if we manage to create a good story, we are hopefully going to capture the attention of our audience and then help them make sense of the world through the story. And this is going to get too deep, too psychological, but through that, they are actually making sense of themselves, because we are always constantly interacting with content and stimulus outside that we absorb and apply categories to in our brain. And then, oh, it makes sense to me now. So when we are putting information out there for people, we are helping them make sense of themselves, their own minds, and the world. No biggie. So a good story finally, hopefully, helps us find common ground with other people so we can finally organize and take action. And it's not an overstatement to say that storytelling is what made civilization possible. And right now, how we encounter at this point that we are at, storytelling might be our best bet to keep civilization from destroying itself. So that's why I think that storytelling for science is one of the most important jobs out there. I love this book. It's called Wired for Story by Lisa Cron. And she has this beautiful, elegant quote where she says that story, as it turns out, was crucial to our evolution because, and it was more so than opposable thumbs, because opposable thumbs let us hang on, but story tells us what to hang on to. And this is the core. This is why storytelling is what makes us human, is how we package information in a way that we can share it with others, and then we can all agree on something and collaborate and build together. Lisa Kron also writes that the pleasure that we derive from a tale well told is nature's way in our brain to seducing us into paying attention to that story. That's why it's so pleasurable. That's why we pay good money to go to the movies. We just love to listen to stories. And that's the way our mind evolved since, I don't know, since we were the missing link. So we're always, as I said, turning to story to teach us the ways of the world. And this is a hard truth that we need to face right now. Science is not story. Science, for all its amazing accomplishments, for all the incredible discoveries that are done every day, does not in itself constitute a good story. A good story is conflict. No conflict, no story. And I will talk about this a little bit more. But again, this is just to bring more strength to the point that storytelling is the exercise of taking the naturalness away from communicating the way we normally do. We need to find where that conflict is. And if there are scientists out there in the audience right now, is the exercise of knowing that just because you're passionate about your science or your work doesn't mean that the rest of us have to be. So storytelling is finding those common bits. So science in itself is not a story. And this is another one from that book. She says that often writers, and in this case, us as storytellers, often we mistakenly believe that all we need to do to craft a great story is the fire, like that great idea, that spark. But we forget the second part of that equation, which is the algebra. So what is she talking about? At least with relevance to what we are discussing today, is that just because Jesse thinks that ocean acidification is super important and every government should be talking about it and learning about it, doesn't mean that the people in government are going to want to do it. And we human beings are lazy. So she has the spark, she has the killer idea, she has the burning desire, she has this thing that is incredibly important, but she cannot forget about the algebra of a story. And what is that algebra? Getting your ingredients and playing with them until you manage to arrange them in a way that it makes the message, those bits of information are arranged in a way that it makes the message now something that the governments would like to hear. So some ingredients, and this is where it gets too like cinematographic, but I have to believe that this can apply to any type of messaging, or else I don't know what I have dedicated my life to. So characters, you need a protagonist to the story that you're telling. Emotions. Emotions are the only way that human beings have to assign value to information. If you don't care about what you are hearing, then you just don't know what's important and what's not. The only way that we have to say, oh, okay, this I should pay attention to, is because it produced an emotion in me. No emotions, then you're done, and you have to go back to the drawing table. You need conflict, as I said. You need a resolution. And in the case of science, I will also stress that you need down-to-earth language and hopefully actionable in the case of ocean acidification, giving people easy, actionable takeaways. Because, I mean, who doesn't remember how gravity was discovered, or at least described by Newton, when an apple fell on his head? Is this story true? Who knows? But it has a character, it has a conflict, it has an eureka moment, it has a resolution. Or how Benjamin Franklin was flying a kite during an electric storm and then electricity, right? If we can wrap these discoveries in these types of stories, it makes them so much more memorable and easy to convey to other people, and they can convey it to other people, right? But we don't know what we're doing, as I said at the beginning of the conversation. If there was a recipe for good storytelling, there would be no Hollywood flops. We are all making educated guesses as to what is it that audiences enjoy and and how can we wrap the information better. I will now speak faster or go faster through the presentation because I just realized I'm over time. With regards to ocean acidification and science, obviously, specialized language is something that we need to be very, very aware of. And this is something that I also would encourage people in the ocean space and ocean acidification space and science space to think about. And it's in science terms, and I would say also policymakers tend to speak in a way that goes completely against how human beings, and when I say human beings, not that you are not, but like normal people that are not talking about science or policy, how we like to communicate, how we in social environments enjoy communicating. We like to hear something very specific first, and if that thing sparks our attention, we would like to know a little more. If what you give us still retains our attention, then a little more, then a little more. And so we go from the very specific to the general. If you manage to retain our attention by giving us more information each time, then finally you will teach us. But how do scientists in their own space or policymakers communicate? They first give you the context of everything there is to know under the sun about this subject. Why? Because they have to give you the baseline, right? And after that, they have to give you the specific of the research or of the findings. But this is a surefire way to bore people from the get-go. And I'm not telling you how to communicate in your own areas of work. Of course, continue to communicate with other scientists this way, that this is how science advances. But when you're trying to reach the horrible general public, you need to go from the specific to the general. And just I'll fly through these ones. They speak for themselves. But this is what terrifies me and keeps me up at night, and it's what Laura was talking about. There is no truth anymore. If it doesn't make me feel good, I don't want to hear it. And it's truly something that we are up against, becoming lazier, becoming more polarized, and believing truly that we get to choose the truth and the truth that makes me feel good. Okay. So, the good news, also to end on a more positive note, like Laura did, as I said, feel that the scientific community is way more aware now. I would like to invite everybody that can afford uh, to invite communication experts way early in the process of whatever it is that you're doing. In my experience, when people are writing grants, more and more funders are saying, what is your communication component? And then it used to be, or more often than not, is still an afterthought. It's like, oh, we're going to reserve this amount of money towards the end of the project, and then we find somebody to make a cute little video, and that's how we justify the communication component. And we need to stop doing that. We need to stop bringing people in that from the beginning strategically look at how to amplify the message and the knowledge that we want to share with others. I realized that I just flew through the ingredients of a story, and at this point, if I were you, I would be very confused on how I can apply it to my own work. But sadly, it's not something I can like properly share in this amount of time that I'm already super up. Yeah, sorry. And basically, another quote from that book. So one suggestion that I would have is try to summarize what you're doing in one or two engaging sentences. Try to look for why you are doing the work that you're doing, connect with that emotion that it produces in you, and then find a way to also share that emotion with the people you want to reach. And these are a few examples of um, two podcasts and books, and a book that deals with really, really complex science related or history related complex stories, and they do it in a completely riveting way. So I recommend that, and apologies for the amount of time that it took.
Not at all, Monica. Thank you. You're one of the few people I would never dare to interrupt. So I appreciate, no, I
I
appreciate
hope that's good.
No, I appreciate the time, and I think what would be kind of fun. I didn't really do a proper job introducing really this section. You know, we wanted Laura to kind of give us the bigger picture in the media environment and how we're thinking about our challenges and our responses. Obviously, I want to show you some tools, but with these presentations now that are following, including Monica's, we wanted to give a little bit of this more, little unpacking, a little bit more of this creative approach. Monica representing the storytelling element. Obviously, you do this very particularly through film, but we'll hear also from Pangea Seed and then from Emily Knight at Blue Convergence Fund about other ways that we are working with partners like yourselves to storytell around acidification. And I think one thing I'd love to offer is a resource to this community as we follow up after when you say, well, we have these ingredients of a story, but how do you put acidification in those ingredients? We did a lot of exercises with you to do just that when we were creating our film, Changing Waters. And it would be fun to kind of think about an easy image that we could synthesize that would show how we took those steps to say, well, who's the protagonist and what are they trying to overcome and what are the solutions here? And I think that would be a fun way to kind of give a little example and demonstration for people to think about how we put that model to use in our work, which sometimes can feel incompatible. So thank you so much for that, Monica. With that, I'll just remind folks that we'll have 30 more minutes. So this is, we're not overly short on time in any way. I'm really excited to now turn it over to Akira Biondo, who is the director at Pangea Seed. Akira and her team have been a great allies of the OA Alliance for, gosh, about 2 years now that we've been collaborating and created this, our first ever sort of digital animation, Carbon in the Current, which we'll definitely share out. But Akira, wanting to turn it over to you to share a little bit about how you think about this storytelling and creativity through artistic expression at Pangea Seed. So over to you if you can share your screen.
Hi, everyone. Let me just get my screen going here. All right, let's see. Are you able to see this?
Looks good.
Great, thank you. Well, good morning, everyone from Hawaii. And thank you so much for having me. I kind of want to start off by just noting that Laura and Monica's presentations have really resonated deeply with me, and I'm really honored to be in such great company today. I've been working at the intersection of art and ocean for over 15 years now, and it's exciting to see that we're finally coming to a point in time where, let's call them alternative, but also tried and really proven forms of communication, storytelling, and advocacy are finally being recognized as something that's not only viable, but really necessary to move us forward. So over the next few minutes, I'm just going to briefly introduce Pangea Seed's work and try to make a case for why the ocean needs art. So as we've talked about, many of the ocean issues that we're trying to communicate today, including OA, share a common challenge. They're often invisible, they're complex, and they're really difficult for people to emotionally connect with. They're also often very negative and doom and gloomy, and that is of no help in the circumstances that we find ourselves in. And in this crowded and fast-moving media landscape, that makes them really easy to overlook. It makes them very appealing to overlook. As Laura and Monica have talked about, we don't want to dwell on the things that don't make us feel good. So when we think about communicating these kinds of issues, the challenge isn't really about explaining the science, in my opinion. It's about making something abstract feel tangible and relevant. And that's where I believe art and storytelling really play an important role. Since our work is so visual, I'm going to share a short video that gives a glimpse into how this comes to life at Pangea Seed. I'm going to walk through it. We were unable, I believe, to get the audio going so the attendees can hear it. So I'll just sort of be narrating over it. This is our brief promo reel. I can share a link to it if someone wants to watch it with the audio. So what you're seeing here is a mix of projects from around the world. We collaborate with a global network of artists, as well as partners and organizations, institutions, to bring ocean issues into the public space. Over the last 14 plus years, a big part of our work has been focused on creating large-scale public murals that transform walls into visual stories, that translate complex environmental issues into something immediate and visible. They're often developed in collaboration with local partners, scientists, and organizations working on the ground, so we can ground those stories in the local lived experience and what is happening in the environment where we are developing these projects. And as part of the curation process, we work closely with artists to interpret scientific topics and encourage them to do that in a way that is culturally relevant and, most importantly, emotionally engaging. Throughout all of our projects, collaboration is key. It allows us to connect scientific knowledge with creative expression and that local context. Make sure that when our team leaves any given location, what we leave behind is a tool that can build a legacy that the local organizations are able to pick up and incorporate into their own toolkits to get the local community engaged and create policy changes and really use it as a jumping off point. And then beyond murals, we also partner on campaigns, exhibitions, and community experiences that invite participation and conversation so that the creation of public art is not the only thing that we do as part of our projects. And the goal across all of this, of course, is to take issues that are often invisible and abstract, make them to something tangible, accessible, and most importantly, something that is part of everyday life. It truly transforms people's everyday lived experience. And so across all of these projects, the goal is really about creating visibility and connection and taking these issues that people may not directly experience and translating them into something tangible and present. And as we've talked about throughout this webinar, is that it's really important to break through in this communication landscape that is only becoming increasingly challenging to navigate. As Laura shared with us in great detail, we're navigating short attention spans, lower trust, and this constant stream of competing messages. And the last thing we want to do is kind of pile onto that mountain of information that we need to somehow figure out the meaning of. And so creative approaches can really help us cut through that. They make invisible issues visible. They create emotional entry points, which often come before understanding. That is really the core of what we do, is like creating emotional connections so we can get them curious enough to want to understand more, to learn more, and then become an advocate. They invite curiosity, and rather than asking people to engage with something that might initially feel complex or distant, we're able to just kind of draw them in with something that is going to pique their interest. And I would say, most importantly, art, especially public art, is accessible. It exists outside of institutions. It's not behind a paywall. It's not in a report. It's not something that's limited to a specific audience. Anyone can encounter it, they can interpret it, and they can engage with it in their own way. Everyone can form an opinion about the art, and that is okay. It is okay for someone not to like an image, but at least we got a reaction. And in that sense, it really helps counter some of the ivory tower effect that can exist around science and policy conversations. And it opens the door for broader participation and connection. And that, I believe, is one of our goals at PainGeoseed, is to broaden the tent of ocean conservation through creative advocacy. So as we think about how to communicate complex challenges like ocean acidification, I think creative approaches aren't just complementary. They're a really important part to make these issues visible and relatable and meaningful to those broader audiences. And a big part of our work at PNGC is partnering with organizations like the OA Alliance, institutions and scientists to help translate their work into creative formats that can reach and engage those new audiences. I'm sure Jesse can relate after speaking to so many policymakers and alliance members that it's all about getting more people involved, and we need to stop just preaching to the choir and breaking through these silos that we've built around ourselves. So truly, I think art turns complexity into action and connection. And I hope that over the course of the following years, we're going to see a greater understanding and greater validation for the use of art, especially within the environmental space. So I'll kind of keep it brief and short, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Akira. It's been awesome to partner with Pangea Seed, and I laugh that your voiceover of your video was quite effective and moving. So it was very nicely done. So thank you for that troubleshoot. And we will definitely be sharing out Carbon in the Current and more about Pangea Seed for folks that are interested in connecting with you and learning more about some of those collaborations that can happen with your type of lens and the artistic network that you have. Great. Well, last but not least, I'll turn it over to a dear friend and colleague, longtime origin story of the OA Alliance, Dr. Emily Knight, who actually works at a funder, ocean funder called Blue Convergence Fund. And I've asked you here, Emily, just to give a little bit of your contemporaneous experience, because in addition to working at Blue Convergence Fund, you are also a poet and very involved in the poetry community. And I've seen how much you have been bringing that medium into not just your own personal life and how you work with colleagues, but also into missions and activities and community building at Blue Convergence Fund. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about your perspective and sort of the role of poetry as an artistic expression in all the work that we do.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jesse, for having me here. And it's great to be on this panel with all of these other great artists and experts. So, like Jesse mentioned, I was asked to say a few words about the role of poetry in community building and its relationship to science. Now, of course, I am the Director of Outreach and Engagement for Blue Convergence Fund. For those of you that don't know us, we are a nonprofit grant-making organization that funds ocean and coastal science grounded in community needs. We do that by creating space and providing support for scientists and other knowledge holders, managers, stakeholders, and more to come together and co-design and co-produce all the projects that we support. We have two programs, Climate Resilient Fisheries and Ocean Biodiversity. And in fact, Climate Resilient Fisheries just put out its first cohort of projects this month. So what does poetry have to do with all of that? Essentially, I brought poetry to BCF. I've been reading and writing poetry since I was about 14. And in addition to my background in oceanography and science policy, I hold an MFA in creative writing from the Warren Wilson Program for Writers. So in this very short talk, I want to highlight three main points about poetry and science, as well as let some of the poetry speak for itself by sharing a few poems. And I will also drop all links to resources I mentioned in the chat at the end, so if you want to explore more on your own. So I do not have a PowerPoint. I am low tech. Point number one, quote, poetry and science are allies, not opposites, unquote. That's Jane Hirschfield, poet and co-founder of the organization Poets for Science. Poets for Science is a wonderful organization that recently organized the anthology, The Nature of Our Times, poems on America's lands, waters, wildlife, and other natural wonders. And it is a poetry companion to a scientific initiative called the Nature Record, which is being led by Dr. Phil Levin from University of Washington. And he is leading a team to assess biodiversity and habitats of America's lands and waters. I am also personally proud to be included in this anthology myself and have organized 2 virtual poetry readings featuring different contributors. And what I want to emphasize here is that poetry connects us by honoring that we are first and foremost emotional creatures. We feel things, we feel for each other before we start calculating and rationalizing. It makes poetry and science good bedfellows because often they get put in separate categories as if the feelings don't connect to the sense we make of those feelings. And we need to reconnect those things. And I think a great poem that's an example of that is a poem by Jane Hirshfield called For What Binds Us. There are names for what binds us, strong forces, weak forces. Look around, you can see them. The skin that forms in a half-empty cup, nails rusting into the places they join, joints dovetailed on their own weight. The way things stay so solidly wherever they've been set down, and gravity, scientists say, is weak. And see how the flesh grows back across a wound with a great vehemence, more strong than the simple, untested surface before. There's a name for it on horses. When it comes back darker and raised, proud flesh, as all flesh, is proud of its wounds, wears them as honors given out after battle, small triumphs pinned to the chest. And when 2 people have loved each other, see how it is like a scar between their bodies, stronger, darker, and proud, how the black cord makes them a single fabric that nothing can tear or mend. So for my second point, quote, what unites poetry and science is a sense of wonder. That is actually from me, from a graduate class I taught on poetry, science, and the concept of wonder at Warren Wilson. So according to the dictionary, as a noun, wonder is, quote, a feeling of surprise mingled with admiration caused by something beautiful, unexpected, unfamiliar, or inexplicable, end quote. As a verb, wonder is, quote, a desire to be curious, to know something, as well as to feel doubt. This means wonder is a state of mind as well as an action. Doing research is an act of curiosity about how the world works. What an experiment reveals is often wondrous. Writing poetry is an act of personal curiosity about yourself, your place in this world. What the poem reveals is often wondrous. When I used to do research for my graduate work in oceanography, pretty much all of my results and conclusions surprised me. It was never, ever what I expected. And I think you're always finding that about the natural world. It's never what you expect. When I sit down to write, I have no idea what's about to come out. So such endeavors are really what rebind us to the living world. And we need to reconnect to that, especially in this time, like past speakers have talked about social media and disconnection from each other. I'm going to read a poem from the nature of our times that I think really exemplifies that. It is Saltwater Siren by Lauren Amico Ito. Sea crystals shimmer in my hair, born of abalone, iridescent cradle, lulled by tides into consciousness, awakened. Moon conjures swells, that Polish shards birthing sand, nudging oyster until pearl arises. We are all made of stardust, transmuted by sea, held together by water. Our power is more than a wave, for we are ocean. And so for point number 3 and my final point, quote, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. And some of you may recognize that one. That's writer James Baldwin. As we know, the science of climate change and ocean acidification is as Al Gore opined an inconvenient truth. I don't totally love the movie Don't Look Up, where they use a comet hurtling towards Earth as a metaphor for climate change and the scientific consensus behind it. But there is a moment where Leonardo DiCaprio, who plays the scientist trying to warn authorities about the comet, has a full-on meltdown on live TV on why won't we listen to facts. And that frustration is real for many and completely earned. Poetry allows for us to engage with those feelings, to recognize and humble ourselves in the face of what sometimes is out of our control, and to grieve what we have and haven't done to confront our challenges. In other words, we all have these feelings of doubt and fear. I turn to poetry in the context of my work at Blue Convergence Fund to really say the quiet part out loud, something I'm gleaming from our grantees and so many of our partners, things that in the past were considered maybe unprofessional to admit. But I think we're now called to actually realize we are all sort of human in this world and to not separate our feelings from the facts and what these challenges mean to us. So I will end on a poem also from the nature of our times. This is Rachel Dillon's A Dead Whale Can Feed an Entire Ecosystem. And she actually read at our last virtual reading. A dead whale can feed an entire ecosystem. But in this poem, nothing dies. Alone in the poem, I make myself brave. No, I show brave to my body, take both to the ocean. Come hurricane, come rip current, come toxic algal bloom. In March, I drift past the estuary to watch an 8-foot dolphin lap the Mill River like a cat pacing a bathtub, sick and disoriented. Biologists will unspool her empty intestines, weigh her gray cerebellum. She swam a great distance to die alone. I'm sorry, I lied. I can't control what lives or dies. I need a place to stow my brain, to hold each moment close as a sand flea caught in my knuckle hairs. Please, someone, tell me a poem can coax oil from a seabird's throat. Tell me what to do with my hands. What can my hands do now? Thank you so much, Jessie, for having me, and I'm happy to be your closer.
Uh, well, you are the right closer. I so appreciate it. And yeah, I don't think I'll do any lightning round of panel questions after that. I think I'll um, express appreciation for you big time, Emily, for bringing that to us. And I want to encourage, I think we've been trying to encourage ourselves at the OA Alliance as an institution that, to your point, we all want to be seen as taken very professionally and kind of, sometimes we feel like these more artistic or more personal expressions of ourselves, there might not be room for that. And I've really been trying to challenge myself and the team OA Alliance are very game for that. And we were able to do a couple acidification haikus, a little poetry campaign that we did last year. And I look forward to doing more things like that. And
I saw that.
yeah. Edie, I know you're on the line. I was almost about to say, get your poem ready. But all to say, I think that we will definitely want to follow your leadership because it's been really inspiring to see you sort of lead in these spaces and how we can build on that and be in community in that direction. So I know we only have the tiniest bit left, so I'm just going to, if there are any questions in the chat, please put them there now or in the Q&A and we can answer them. I will only say, yeah, if Akira and Hula, even if you'd like to come on screen, that'd be great, just to say hello to you. I am seeing this just only in the chat that we have colleagues from the International Ocean Film Foundation. Hi, Bob. It would be great to be in touch with you. Yes to all of the things that you say. That would be great. And I think without that, maybe I think what I'd like to close with is if I can just give you all one question and you can give me the one word or certainly 30-second answer based upon your experience with this, and then we'll close out that way, and then make resources and this recording available to anyone that wants them. So my first question to you, Laura, 30 seconds, maybe 1 minute, but 30 seconds. Why is it not scary to reach out to reporters and earn media? What is your advice for people that feel anxious about reaching out to reporters on topics like acidification?
Mm, uh, because we need you. And that feeling of being like under-resourced and nobody listens to you that you have, reporters have too. And when they feel seen, appreciated, and when resources are given to them and access and good stories, it's our love language. Never hesitate, especially if you do it thoughtfully. We feel the same way you do.
Thanks, Laura. Monica, is there any issue so boring, so scientifically rigorous, like dissociated hydrogen ions, that can't be formatted into a beautiful storytelling narrative?
No. No, no. Science is incredibly interesting and beyond relevant to the life of every single human being. So, no, science is full of incredible stories.
Great. Akira, everyone tells us that working in obscure things like artistic expression are hard because we need the metrics on how they're moving the needle and that we're not solving climate change. How many hearts and minds were changed? And do we know if they actually went out and voted for that thing or did that extra action? Tell us why having super hard metrics on artistic interventions aren't the best way to think about it. Are there value in soft metrics? How's that? Oh, and you're on mute. So sorry.
Sorry about that. I believe in all the soft metrics. We must touch people's hearts, and we're not going to do that with graphs and reports. Um, it is the bane of my existence to deal with funders and partners who are like, oh, so what's the impact? What sort of impact have you had? And I think people are starting to come around. They're starting to see that there is value beyond numbers of people reached and specific outcomes that can be measured in a really concrete way. And what I'm most excited about right now is the emerging research coming out of the neuro arts field that is truly validating what I have known for a long time. And now people much smarter than me are actually telling us that that is true. So that's what I'm really excited about.
Thanks, Akira. Emily, can anyone be a poet and why should they be?
Yes. Yes. You know, I think, like I said, for me, it's a way to sort of connect with my place in the world and to feel home in the world. And I'm gonna quote something that the poet Matthew Olsman actually said that really resonated with me is he was like, writing a poem can be like practicing a musical instrument. You don't have to be Jimmy Page to sit down and play. And you can just play around. And it's always surprising and it's always fun. And so yes, I think everybody should engage with poetry. And since I was young, I've seen a lot more people turning to poetry. I think when I first engaged with it, it felt very siloed off in this kind of literary academic-y kind of thing that nobody quite understood. And I see more and more younger people turning to poetry. So
Great. Well, thank you all so, so much for being here with us today. And thank you, Juliana Corrales, who's our comms director and creative director here at the OA Alliance. Appreciate you. If you're allowed to share your screen, you don't have to, but you are very much responsible for bringing all these faces and all of these different disciplines and all these different art forms into the way the Alliance works and how we tell our story and how we think about reaching new people with new messages. So a special appreciation to you for being the driver behind this kind of different way that we're thinking about our communications work. So with that, I will say thank you to everybody for hanging out with us today, and we'll be sure to reach you with a follow-up email. We have your registration emails, and make sure that you get all the resources and links in one easy place, so it's easy to follow along. And always encourage you to reach out to the Alliance because we love to know and work with you. So thanks so much.